21 assistants walked into Adrian Whitmore's office believing they had landed the opportunity of a lifetime. 21 assistants walked out before sunset. Claire Bennett was about to become number 22, or so everyone believed. The elevator climbed silently toward the 82nd floor of Whitmore Tower, and with every passing second, Claire felt the weight of the rumors she had heard during orientation. The billionaire CEO was impossible. Demanding. Cold. Some employees called him a genius. Most called him a nightmare. When the elevator doors finally opened, she stepped into a reception area so polished it looked more like a luxury hotel than a corporate office. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the Manhattan skyline stretching for miles beneath a gray morning sky. Behind the reception desk, a woman barely looked up from her computer. "New assistant?" she asked. Claire nodded. The woman opened a drawer and slid a black box across the counter. "You'll need this." Claire frowned and lifted the lid. Inside sat 21 engraved nameplates. Some scratched. Some cracked. Some still shining. Every one carried a different name. "What is this?" Claire asked quietly. The receptionist gave a tired smile. "Your predecessors." For a moment, Claire thought it was a joke. Then she realized nobody around her was laughing. 21? She whispered. 21. The woman confirmed. "Good luck becoming number 22. Before Claire could respond, a sharp voice echoed from down the hallway. "If nobody can provide accurate numbers, why am I paying them?" The entire floor seemed to freeze. A man emerged from a glass conference room, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Claire's monthly rent. Adrian Whitmore. His blue eyes scanned the room with the precision of a machine. Two department heads followed behind him, looking as if they had just survived a storm. Adrian stopped when he noticed Claire. "Who are you?" he asked. "Claire Bennett. Your new executive assistant." His expression didn't change. For now. Then he kept walking. Claire watched him disappear into a private office at the end of the corridor. No welcome. No handshake. No smile. The receptionist quietly mouthed. "Run." Claire almost laughed. Almost. The day became a blur of impossible demands. 3 meetings moved forward by 2 hours. A flight schedule changed twice. A shareholder presentation disappeared minutes before a conference call. Every problem somehow landed on Claire's desk. At noon, Adrian rejected a carefully prepared calendar without even sitting down. At 2 o'clock, he handed her a stack of reports and requested revisions before 3. At 4, he changed priorities again. By 6, most employees had gone home. Claire remained at her desk, exhausted but determined. Through the glass walls of his office, she could see Adrian still working alone beneath the glow of a single lamp. He hadn't stopped once all day. He hadn't eaten. He barely spoke unless necessary. For the first time, Claire wondered if the rumors had missed something. Maybe this wasn't arrogance. Maybe it was something else entirely. At exactly 7:30, Adrian stepped out of his office. His eyes landed on her. "You're still here?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment. "Why?" Claire closed her laptop and stood. "Because I haven't quit." For the first time all day, something flickered behind his guarded expression. It vanished almost immediately. "We'll see about tomorrow," he said before walking away. Claire watched the elevator doors close behind him. Then she glanced at the box containing 21 nameplates. Slowly, she shut the lid. She had a feeling tomorrow was going to be even harder. Claire arrived at Whitmore Tower before sunrise the next morning, a large coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other. The city outside was still waking up, but the executive floor was already glowing with light. She had barely settled into her chair when her computer chimed. 5 new meeting requests. 3 scheduled changes. 2 urgent calls waiting for approval. She glanced at the clock. It was not even 6 in the morning. Around her, employees drifted in one by one. Most looked surprised to see her. One senior manager slowed near her desk and raised an eyebrow. You came back. Claire smiled. Apparently. The manager laughed softly. That makes you unique around here. By 8 o'clock the floor was moving at full speed. Adrian Whitmore emerged from his office carrying a tablet and a stack of documents. He never greeted anyone. He never stopped walking. People simply adjusted their pace around him like planets orbiting a sun. Claire followed closely, taking notes while he dictated changes to a product launch, a shareholder meeting, and a charity event scheduled for the following month. His mind seemed to operate 3 steps ahead of everyone else. It was exhausting just trying to keep up. Yet something else caught her attention. Adrian never wasted time criticizing people personally. He challenged ideas. He demanded precision. He expected excellence. Employees interpreted it as cruelty because few could meet his standards. Around noon, Claire entered the employee lounge hoping for 5 quiet minutes. Instead, she found a group of workers gathered around a table. The conversation stopped when she walked in. How long are we betting this one lasts? Someone joked. A woman from accounting laughed. I give her until Friday. Another shook his head. She will not make it that far. Claire poured herself a cup of coffee and smiled politely. Nice to know everyone has confidence in me. The room erupted with awkward laughter. Then one employee lowered his voice. Honestly, it is not you. Nobody understands him. Understands who? Claire asked. Mr. Whitmore. The employee glanced toward the hallway before continuing. He used to be different. Claire looked up. Different how? The man hesitated. I do not know. People just say something happened years ago. After that, he stopped smiling. Stopped socializing. Stopped trusting anyone. Before Claire could ask more, her phone rang. Adrian. She immediately answered. Mr. Whitmore? Conference room 12. Now. The line disconnected. By late afternoon, Claire was running on determination alone. Yet during a meeting with investors, she noticed something peculiar. Adrian answered every question flawlessly. His voice remained calm. His posture never changed. But when a speaker casually mentioned family vacations, a shadow crossed his face. It lasted less than a second. Most people missed it. Claire did not. Later that evening, the office emptied once again. Lights shut off floor by floor across the building. Yet Adrian remained in his office. Claire glanced through the glass wall while organizing tomorrow's schedule. He was sitting perfectly still, staring toward the skyline beyond the windows. Not working. Not reading. Just staring. For the first time since meeting him, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man carrying something invisible. Then he opened a desk drawer. Claire only caught a brief glimpse before he quickly shut it again. But she was certain she had seen the corner of an old photograph inside. A few seconds later, Adrian looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. Neither spoke. Neither looked away. Then he closed the drawer completely, and whatever secret lived inside it disappeared once more. The following week felt less like a job and more like a marathon that never ended. Claire quickly learned that Adrian Whitmore seemed to operate on a schedule known only to himself. Emails arrived before dawn. Meetings appeared without warning. Entire projects shifted direction in a matter of minutes. Yet somehow she kept up. Not perfectly, but well enough that she was still there when everyone expected her to be gone. On Thursday evening, rain tapped softly against the towering glass windows of Whitmore Tower while most of Manhattan rushed home. The executive floor had become almost silent. Claire sat alone at her desk reviewing travel arrangements for an upcoming conference in Chicago when she noticed a light still glowing inside Adrian's office. Hours had passed since the last meeting. He should have left by now. Instead, he remained behind closed doors. She tried to focus on her work, but curiosity kept pulling her attention toward the office. Eventually she stood, carrying a folder that required his approval. Through the glass wall she saw him seated behind his desk. The city lights reflected across the room, casting long shadows over the polished wood surfaces. Adrian was not looking at financial reports. He was not reviewing contracts. He was staring at the same locked drawer she had noticed days earlier. His expression seemed distant, almost lost. Claire gently knocked. The sound snapped him back to reality. "Come in," he said. She stepped inside and handed him the folder. "These need your signature before tomorrow morning." Adrian nodded and signed without reading much. His attention drifted repeatedly toward the drawer. Claire noticed it again. The brass key remained inserted in the lock. For a brief moment she considered asking about it. Instead, she remained professional. "Anything else, Mr. Whitmore?" she asked. "No." She turned to leave. Then his voice stopped her. "Why are you still here?" Claire looked back. "Because the work is not finished." Adrian studied her carefully. "Most people would have gone home hours ago. Most people are not responsible for your schedule." A faint reaction crossed his face. Not quite amusement. Not quite surprise. Something in between. As she exited the office, she accidentally left her notebook on a side table. She did not realize it until several minutes later. Returning quietly, she noticed the office door was partially open. Adrian stood near the window with the drawer open beside him. For the first time, Claire saw what was hidden inside. There was an old photograph. A silver ring resting on top of a folded letter. Nothing more. Yet the way Adrian looked at those objects made them seem more valuable than every asset his company owned. Claire immediately stepped back before he noticed her. Her heart raced. The mystery was no longer about what was inside the drawer. The mystery was why those simple items seemed capable of changing the expression of a man who never showed emotion. Moments later, Adrian emerged carrying his coat. He locked the drawer again and slipped the key into his pocket. As he walked past Claire's desk, he placed her forgotten notebook beside her keyboard. "Do not leave important things behind," he said. Then he paused for a second. "Some things are harder to recover than others." Before Claire could respond, he disappeared toward the elevator. She watched the doors close and realized that for the first time since arriving at Whitmore Tower, she had seen a crack in the armor surrounding Adrian Whitmore. And whatever story lived behind that photograph, that ring, and that letter was far more painful than anyone in the building seemed to know. The next few days felt strangely different. Adrian did not become friendlier. He did not suddenly smile or start making small talk. If anything, he became even more demanding. On Monday, he moved an executive presentation forward by 48 hours. On Tuesday, he scheduled a strategy session before sunrise. On Wednesday, he changed an entire investor itinerary less than 3 hours before departure. It almost felt deliberate. Claire began to suspect that Adrian was testing her. The thought followed her throughout the week. Every impossible assignment seemed carefully designed to push her toward the exit. Yet she stayed. Early Friday morning, a message appeared on her calendar at 5:15. Emergency meeting. Executive conference room. Claire stared at the notification while drinking coffee in her apartment. Most people would have complained. Instead, she grabbed her coat and headed into the dark Manhattan morning. By 6 o'clock she was sitting across from Adrian while senior executives struggled to stay awake. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. When it finally ended, everyone rushed toward the elevators. Everyone except Adrian. He remained seated, reviewing documents. Claire gathered her notes and prepared to leave when his voice stopped her. "You made a mistake on page 14. She looked down immediately. He was right. One figure had been entered incorrectly. "I will fix it," she said. Adrian nodded. "I know." The response surprised her. It was not criticism. It was confidence. Later that afternoon, another challenge arrived. A major client unexpectedly requested revisions to a proposal scheduled for delivery the next morning. The project required several departments to cooperate, which usually meant delays, excuses, and confusion. Claire spent hours coordinating managers, collecting data, and reorganizing schedules. By 9 that evening the proposal was finished. She delivered it personally to Adrian's office. He reviewed the first few pages in silence. Acceptable, he finally said. Coming from Adrian Whitmore, it sounded remarkably close to praise. Claire laughed softly before she could stop herself. Adrian looked up. Something amusing? I am starting to understand your language. One eyebrow lifted. My language? Most people hear criticism. I think what you actually mean is that you expect people to improve. For several seconds Adrian said nothing. The city lights reflected in the glass behind him. Then something unexpected happened. The corner of his mouth moved slightly upward. It was gone almost immediately, but Claire saw it. A real smile. Small. Brief. Genuine. You should not analyze your employer, he said. Occupational hazard. Dangerous habit. So I have been told. Adrian looked back at the proposal, though Claire noticed his expression had softened. As she turned toward the door, his voice stopped her once more. Why did you take this job? Claire hesitated. Nobody had asked her that since she arrived. Because I needed a fresh start. From what? She thought about the question. A life that was too small. Adrian considered her answer carefully. And have you found what you were looking for? Claire smiled. I am not sure yet. For the first time, Adrian looked as though he understood exactly what she meant. Neither spoke after that. Claire left the office and headed toward the elevators. Behind her, Adrian remained alone beneath the glow of the desk lamp. Yet something had changed. The distance between them no longer felt impossible. The walls around him were still there, but now she could see the outline of a door hidden somewhere within them. She simply did not know what would happen when it finally opened. 2 weeks later, Whitmore Tower was preparing for one of the most important presentations of the year. Investors from across the country were flying into New York, and every department was under pressure. Claire expected another endless day of schedules, meetings, and last-minute adjustments. Instead, an unexpected storm rolled across the city that afternoon. Dark clouds swallowed the skyline, and heavy snow began falling earlier than forecast. By evening, flights were delayed. Roads were crowded, and most employees had already gone home. Claire remained behind, organizing changes for the next morning's event. The executive floor felt unusually quiet. Around 8 o'clock, she noticed that Adrian's office door was closed. That was not unusual. What caught her attention was the silence. No phone calls. No meetings. No movement. After another 30 minutes passed, concern finally pushed her out of her chair. She walked toward the office and knocked softly. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Carefully, she opened the door. Adrian was standing near the window overlooking the snow-covered city. His shoulders were tense. One hand rested against the glass. He looked completely unaware that she had entered. Mr. Whitmore? Claire asked gently. He turned suddenly. For the first time since she had met him, his usual composure was gone. His face looked pale. His breathing was uneven. Not dramatic. Not alarming. Just a man struggling beneath a weight nobody else could see. You should go home, he said quietly. Claire did not move. Are you okay? Adrian looked away toward the storm outside. I said you should leave. Something in his voice told her this was not anger. It was fear. Claire stepped closer. I am not leaving. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of wind against the glass. Several long seconds passed before Adrian finally spoke. 5 years ago, there was a snowstorm just like this one. Claire said nothing. Everyone remembers me as the man who built Whitmore Technologies. His voice sounded distant. Nobody remembers the woman who helped me build the life behind it. Slowly, he walked toward his desk. His hand trembled slightly as he unlocked the drawer. For the first time, he did not hide what was inside. The photograph. The silver ring. The folded letter. Adrian picked up the picture and stared at it. Her name was Rebecca. Claire listened quietly. We were supposed to have dinner that night. I cancelled because of work. His eyes lowered to the ring. I told her I would make it up to her the next day. A sad smile appeared. There was no next day. Claire felt her chest tighten. Suddenly everything made sense. The long hours. The isolation. The impossible standards. The walls he had built around himself. Adrian was not punishing everyone else. He was punishing himself. It was not your fault, Claire said softly. Adrian shook his head. That is what everyone keeps saying. His voice nearly broke. The problem is that I do not believe them. The storm continued beyond the windows while silence filled the office. Then Claire pulled a chair beside his desk and sat down. She did not offer advice. She did not try to fix him. She simply stayed. And for the first time in 5 years, Adrian Whitmore was not alone with the memory that haunted him. The conversation in Adrian's office changed something neither of them could fully explain. The following days felt lighter, though very little about their routine actually changed. Adrian still arrived before everyone else. He still demanded excellence. He still filled Claire's calendar with impossible tasks. Yet the tension that once dominated every interaction had begun to fade. For the first time, Claire occasionally caught him asking how her morning was. Sometimes he even waited for the answer. One Tuesday evening they left the office after a 12-hour workday and found themselves standing in the lobby at the same time. Outside, Manhattan glowed beneath thousands of lights. Adrian glanced toward the street. Have you eaten dinner? He asked. Claire blinked. Is that a business question? No. Then no. Adrian nodded once. Come on. 20 minutes later they sat inside a small neighborhood restaurant tucked between two brownstone buildings. It was not expensive. It was not exclusive. In fact, Claire was fairly certain nobody would expect one of the wealthiest men in New York to be there. Adrian seemed to prefer it that way. They talked about things that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or investor meetings. Claire shared stories about growing up in Ohio. Adrian admitted that before building his company, he spent years working from a tiny apartment with furniture that barely matched. They laughed over failed first jobs and embarrassing mistakes. At one point Claire realized something surprising. Adrian was funny. Not intentionally. Just genuinely human in a way nobody inside Whitmore Tower ever saw. Over the following weeks, those moments became more frequent. Coffee before meetings. Conversations during late-night work sessions. Quiet walks back to the parking garage. Little by little, the distance between them continued shrinking. The biggest change, however, was happening inside Adrian himself. Employees noticed it first. Meetings felt less intimidating. Executives stopped looking terrified every time he entered a room. Even the receptionist on the 82nd floor seemed confused by the transformation. One afternoon Claire overheard two managers whispering near the elevators. Did he actually thank someone today? One asked. Twice, the other replied. I thought I imagined it. Claire smiled but said nothing. Later that evening she found Adrian standing by the window in his office. The photograph of Rebecca rested on his desk beside a framed company award. It was no longer hidden inside the drawer. That alone felt significant. Adrian noticed her looking at it. I used to think moving forward meant forgetting, he said quietly. Claire stepped beside him. And now? He stared at the city below. Now I think it means remembering without staying trapped there. For a moment neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. Then Adrian looked at her. Really looked at her. You know, he said softly, you are the first person who stayed long enough to tell me when I was wrong. Claire laughed. Trust me. That list is much longer than you think. Adrian smiled. This time the smile remained. Warm. Unforced. Real. And as the lights of New York shimmered beyond the glass, both of them felt something changing. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just slowly and steadily, like sunrise arriving after a very long night. For a while, Claire allowed herself to believe the hardest part was over. Adrian was sleeping more. He was leaving the office before midnight on some days. Employees no longer scattered whenever he appeared in a hallway. Even Whitmore Tower itself seemed brighter. Then everything changed. It started with a missing file. A confidential acquisition proposal disappeared from a secure internal system just 3 days before a major board meeting. At first, nobody panicked. Technical issues happened. Files were recovered. Problems were solved. But by the following morning, rumors were spreading through every floor of the building. Someone had accessed restricted information. Someone inside the company had leaked sensitive documents. Claire arrived at work to find conversation stopping whenever she entered a room. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. People who usually smiled avoided eye contact. Others whispered when they thought she could not hear them. By noon, Adrian was called into an emergency meeting with the board. The atmosphere inside the conference room felt colder than any winter storm. Claire waited outside for nearly 2 hours. When the doors finally opened, executives filed out looking tense. Adrian remained behind with the chief financial officer, Victor Langley. Victor had worked at Whitmore Technologies for more than a decade. Respected. Trusted. Untouchable. As Adrian stepped into the hallway, Claire immediately noticed a change in his expression. The warmth she had slowly come to know was gone. "Mr. Whitmore?" she asked carefully. He looked at her for several seconds before speaking. "Come to my office." Her stomach tightened. Inside, Adrian closed the door and placed a folder on the desk. Security completed its review. Claire glanced down. Her employee identification number appeared across multiple pages. "What is this?" she asked quietly. "The leaked files were accessed using your credentials." The words hit like ice water. Claire stared at the documents in disbelief. "That is impossible." Adrian remained silent. "You know I would never do that." Still silence. For the first time since they met, Claire could not read him. "Adrian." The name slipped out before she could stop herself. His eyes briefly closed. "The board wants answers." "And what do you believe?" she asked. The question hung between them. Adrian looked away. That hurt more than any accusation could have. Claire realized he was struggling between trust and evidence. Between what he felt and what the documents appeared to show. Victor entered moments later carrying additional reports. "I am sorry, Claire," he said with practiced sympathy. "Nobody wanted this outcome." Something about his tone felt wrong. Too smooth. Too prepared. Yet she had no proof. By evening, the board announced an internal investigation. Claire was placed on administrative leave. Employees watched silently as she packed her belongings. The same desk where she had survived impossible schedules now felt unfamiliar. As she placed the last item into a cardboard box, her eyes landed on the black container holding 21 old nameplates. Slowly, she lifted the lid. 21 people had left before her. She had promised herself she would not become another name in the box. But this was different. This was not failure. It was heartbreak. When Claire finally stepped into the elevator, she looked back one last time. Across the executive floor, Adrian stood alone behind the glass wall of his office. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Then the doors slid shut between them, leaving both of them wondering whether the trust they had built was strong enough to survive what came next. 3 days after Claire left Whitmore Tower, Adrian realized the silence felt different. It was not the familiar silence he had lived with for years. This one felt wrong. Her desk remained empty. No carefully organized schedules appeared on his calendar. No notes waited on his desk reminding him about details everyone else overlooked. More than once, he found himself reaching for the phone before remembering there was no reason to call. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. Victor Langley seemed eager to provide updates. Too eager. Every report pointed toward Claire. Every piece of evidence appeared perfectly arranged. Adrian wanted to believe it. It would have been easier. Simpler. Yet something refused to fit. Late one evening, while reviewing security records himself, Adrian noticed a detail everyone else had missed. The access logs connected to Claire's credentials were generated while she was physically attending a board presentation in another building across the city. The timestamps overlapped. It was impossible for her to be in both places. Adrian sat motionless as the realization settled over him. Claire had been telling the truth. The evidence had been manipulated. For the next 48 hours, he personally reviewed months of financial records. Hidden transactions slowly emerged from layers of paperwork. Payments routed through consulting accounts. Unauthorized transfers disguised as vendor expenses. Every trail pointed toward the same person. Victor Langley. The man who had spent years earning everyone's trust had been quietly using the company for his own gain. Claire had never been the target. She had simply become convenient. By Friday morning, the board convened an emergency session. The truth unfolded quickly once the full records were presented. Victor resigned immediately and disappeared from the company. Yet Adrian barely cared about the outcome. One thought consumed him. Claire. He had failed the one person who had stayed when everyone else walked away. He had looked at evidence instead of trust. Facts instead of character. And now she was gone. Adrian searched everywhere he could think of. Her apartment had already been vacated. Former coworkers had no answers. Days passed. Then a receptionist remembered something. Claire often spent her weekends volunteering at a small literacy center in Brooklyn. Adrian left immediately. The center occupied a renovated brick building surrounded by community gardens. Children and families moved through the entrance carrying books and backpacks. Inside, Claire sat at a long table helping organize donated materials. She looked up when the door opened. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment neither moved. Adrian walked toward her slowly. "I know the truth," he said. Claire remained silent. "I should have trusted you." His voice carried none of the confidence people associated with billionaires. Only regret. "You were right about Victor." Claire looked down at the papers in front of her. "That does not change what happened." Adrian nodded. "I know." The honesty surprised her. He was not making excuses. He was not defending himself. He was accepting responsibility. After several seconds, Claire finally looked up. Again. The man standing before her no longer resembled the untouchable executive who terrified boardrooms. He looked like someone afraid of losing something important. And for the first time since leaving Whitmore Tower, Claire saw how much the experience had changed him too. Over the next several weeks, Adrian did not pressure Claire for an answer. He did not ask her to return to Whitmore Tower. He did not try to solve everything with money or grand promises. Instead, he showed up. Sometimes with donated books for the literacy center. Sometimes with coffee for the volunteers. Sometimes with nothing more than a quiet conversation at the end of the day. Slowly, trust began rebuilding itself, not through words but through consistency. One afternoon, Claire received an invitation to the annual Whitmore Foundation Gala. At first she planned to decline. Then curiosity won. On the night of the event, she stepped into the grand ballroom overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors while executives, investors, and community leaders filled the room. Claire immediately noticed something unusual. Along one side of the ballroom stood a glass display case. Inside were 21 engraved nameplates. The same ones she had seen on her first day. Guests stopped to examine them while quietly reading the plaque beneath. Claire moved closer. Her breath caught. The plaque read, 21 people left because they worked for a company. One person stayed because she cared about the people inside it. Before she could process the words, the lights dimmed. Adrian stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent. He stood confidently behind the podium, yet Claire recognized the nervousness hidden beneath his calm expression. For years, Adrian began, I believed success meant building something no one could take away from me. I was wrong. The audience listened carefully. The most valuable things in life are never buildings, companies, or bank accounts. They are people. And sometimes those people arrive when you least expect them. His eyes found Claire across the ballroom. A few months ago, someone walked into my office and refused to quit. She challenged me. She frustrated me. She reminded me how to live again. A murmur moved through the crowd. Adrian stepped away from the podium. Claire Bennett, would you join me up here? Every eye in the room turned toward her. Her heart raced as she slowly approached the stage. When she reached him, Adrian smiled. Not the guarded smile of a chief executive. The genuine smile she had come to know. Then he reached into his pocket. The entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Adrian revealed a small velvet box and opened it. Inside rested a beautiful ring. 5 years ago, I thought my story had ended, he said softly. You taught me it was still being written. Claire felt tears gathering in her eyes. You stayed when leaving would have been easier. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. And every good thing in my life started changing the day you sat down at that desk. Adrian took a slow breath. Claire Bennett, will you spend the rest of your life with me? The room disappeared. The city lights beyond the windows disappeared. There was only the man standing in front of her. The man who had finally learned to let go of guilt and choose hope. Claire smiled through tears and nodded. Yes. Applause erupted throughout the ballroom as Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger. Months later, they celebrated their wedding surrounded by friends, family, and colleagues. Back at Whitmore Tower, the black box of nameplates remained on display as a reminder that true success is not measured by how many people work for you, but by how many lives you touch. And for Adrian Whitmore, the greatest achievement of his life was never the company he built. It was the future he built with Claire.